one of our main job competencies at Environmental Incentives is meeting management. So we take it really seriously, and even we definitely hold ourselves as the executive team really accountable to that. Um, but yeah, I think the other thing that maybe seems obvious is, but for the executive team is being really, really open and honest and um, both, you know, comfortable giving, but also receiving feedback. So crucial in us being able to work together and truly be effective.
Our guest today is Andrew Alexandrovich, the COO of Environmental Incentives, a mission driven organization that has grown from 40 employees to over 135 employees under his leadership. With a background in environmental management and a sharp focus on strategic operations, Andrew has helped secure over $400 million in funding while transforming core systems across HR, finance, and enterprise technology. In this episode specifically today, we dive into the realities of leading growth through change. Andrew shares how he's helped transition teams from in person to remote to kind of a hybrid while keeping company culture alive, the role of annual retreats and keeping engagement happening with team while running a remote company, and how he keeps the executive team aligned through every phase of expansion. He also offers thoughtful insights on team restructuring and change management, both during the highs and the inevitable lows of scaling a company. So, if you are navigating growth or thinking about how to evolve your leadership team and company culture, this conversation is definitely for you. All right, here we go. We are here with Andrew Alexandrovich. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I am really excited about this episode. Andrew is currently working with environmental incentives. So, why don't you just give us a little bit of a background on yourself and the company that you're with?
Sure. So I started working with environmental incentives about 15 years ago. When I started, company was very much in startup mode. I was one of three employees, I think, at the time, plus the two founding partners. And we've kind of just grown over the past 15 years. And through the company's growth, I've grown through different operational roles. And um, most recently, becoming the COO of Environmental Incentives in 2020. And at that point, we were really looking ahead to scaling up to be a mid-sized company working throughout the US and overseas. And my role was to build up our systems to get us ready for that growth.
Mm, amazing. Okay, and what led you? So, 15 years ago, you were one of the kind of founding team members. What led you to joining?
So I started actually outside after my undergrad. My background's in environmental studies, and I found environmental incentives shortly after I graduated. Started, in a entry level role, and uh, kind of went from there. And uh, as I grew through the years, um, like I said earlier, did all, kind of played all the internal functions and building up the internal infrastructure of the company. Until about 2015, I decided to pursue my master's. And at that point, I decided to do the Duke Environmental Leadership Program and Master's in Environmental Management, which is a professional program working full time, doing grad school kind of on the side, and did that because I wanted to kind of get the exposure to more exposure to the technical work that the company was doing so I could kind of have that well-rounded leadership skill set of understanding the work and then also how to function and run the business.
So, you were doing that in combination at the same time?
Yeah, it was it was a remote kind of hybrid program. So remained working full time at Environmental Incentives and, still, managing a lot of the internal operations, but then also doing a grad program kind of nights and weekends sort of thing, for a couple years.
Okay, sweet. I would love to hear how you feel that contributed or benefited your role. And we'll circle back to that in a second. But could you tell us a little bit first, what does environmental incentives do as a company?
So we're essentially a management consulting firm that works with different organizations that want to design environmental programs. So our company we're started in actually South Lake Tahoe, California, with the program to help some of the agencies there to achieve water quality goals for Lake Tahoe. So essentially, our role was to understand what the goal that they were going for, and then help the agencies develop a program to track and monitor and report progress for that environmental program. So since then, we've kind of built through working, applying similar concepts with state agencies, local and municipalities, and even with some nonprofits and foundations, and then our biggest client being USAID. So kind of applying similar concepts of working at the intersection of environment and international development.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So I imagine that the operational piece of this company, there's probably some really important things that get to be measured and managed properly.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're from the operations standpoint, we're a service-based company, so we are consultants. So, a lot of part of the big part of my role was developing systems, and, part of my leadership style was, you know, really developing systems that work for the users to be able to go and deliver our work. So, that was a lot of the challenge. And then, within the federal contracting space and just some having lots of different donors from federal government to state governments to private NGOs and foundations. Just, a lot of complex compliance requirements that uh, don't always lend to efficiency. And so, finding that balance of having that people centered, like user focused, while maintaining the compliance side was always a fun challenge.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. The compliance piece with the people. Tell me, like, what were some of the challenges with team and then also doing that you encountered?
Well, so we are one of the great things about environmental incentives. It's a very focus on the person, like rich culture of learning, adaptability, and continual improvement. So, one of the things that we really focused on a lot with my team, and as we were building the internal systems and the infrastructure, is change management practices. So, really like understanding, there's compliance requirements that we have to make sure we're following. And then there's the delivering the work that we are hired to do. And so, what that means when you're rolling out a new system or process, whether it's related to just operations or HR or finance or whatever it is, program management, um, really just engaging the users and the vision and the definition and, drafting that system or policy or process, and then going through beta test and refinement period with the users so that when we end with the final product, it's not a product that's kind of been developed by the operations team and then put out there, and we find, 10 different snags along the way, and we're not able to deliver the work on time or efficiently, but instead it's something that's been sort of co-created, and people understand it by the time it's rolled out because they've been engaged and they're more bought in and, able to use it efficiently and still deliver their work on time and, within the regulations, whatever it is that relates to that process.
Hmm. Sounds like there's a lot of different pieces to kind of navigate from a leadership standpoint, but then also strategically. I'm curious for you in being at this company for 15 years, and it sounds like you've gone through a few different key transitions or key roles. What what are the reasons why you were chosen to be the COO recently?
Well, I think the reason that I was chosen is I had kind of like grown with the company through multiple stages of growth. So, I became the COO in 2020, and I think at that point we were about 40 employees, and um, and to our peak, which was about 135 employees. Um, and so uh, at that point, when we were 40 employees, we were really like, we were looking ahead to being a mid-sized business. Still, like, had a lot of foundational systems, but they were really set up to be a small business. But I had, grown with the company at that point. I guess this was 8 or 9 years into my time there. Um, and so I really understood all the interconnections of how our different systems work, from like program delivery to HR and the finance and the operations systems that, help us deliver that work. I just had a really deep understanding of that, and also the company culture and the regulations, because I had spent even that time up until that point getting the company's infrastructure set up to be that scale of a business and be compliant, um, and efficient and all that. So
Cool. I think that anyone who's listening, we have people who are already COOs, and then we have people who listen who are, that's kind of their trajectory of where they're wanting to go. And I think it's so important where even if your role says that this is only what you're focusing on, asking leadership and seeing if there's anything else that you can take on, or can you understand other parts of the company so that you can have that, like you said, super well-rounded kind of knowledge of what's happening. And then when you step into a role like you have, I'm sure it was probably way less of a transition than maybe the title says. What was that stepping into the actual title? Did a lot shift for you, or was it kind of just the title? Like, what were some of those things that were different, if there was?
yeah, well, I mean, before I got the title, was officially named COO, I was effectively running the internal functions of the business. I think the difference was two main things: the quality that we were doing it. Like I said, one was built for a small business. The other, was a mid-sized business operating globally, multiple, director kind of VP level positions with teams underneath them. So multiple verticals throughout the company. So the quality needed to be, much more, instead of small business, uh, scaled for that size, like best in class, kind of like industry standard systems and processes. So just quality and the approach and kind of maintaining the culture, um, was one difference as I stepped into that role. And then, kind of like I just said, but the magnitude. So since we had more managers, more program managers, more program directors, more clients, just needing that, quality to kind of match that magnitude and to be able to do it at scale.
Right. Yes. Two questions from that. You said maintaining the culture, making that transition. What how did you manage the culture when you guys were making that shift and so many things sounds like it was changing? Were there any specific meetings or processes? What did that look like?
Yeah. Well, we've always been a very people focused organization. And so, I think some of the things to maintain culture, one thing I didn't mention too is, as I became COO, was right as COVID started too. So we were going from, not only were we going from like, you know, all the changes that everybody was experiencing, like on site to a fully remote company, we're now operating as a hybrid company. um, we were looking at this kinda doubling in size, at that point. So, what we did to maintain the culture is just, different engagement techniques. Annual culture survey where we're polling staff around the time of our annual planning cycle to see what was working, what we could improve on, from everything from, uh, compensation to our systems to equipment and our softwares we're using. So doing that kind of annual pulse check with the company and building that into our annual planning cycle every year was one way that we maintained culture. Another was just we have a great team of staff that are really good at doing fun events for the company. we have annual retreats, um, that, always has some kind of team building. Then we've been really good about having kind of like internal team building, encouraging things. Like we have something called the Sunshine Fund that just, it makes it easy for staff to send a little gift like flowers to a team member to recognize good work. So just kind of like little things like that, that especially being kind of a dispersed team going to remote, were really important to help us stay connected and maintain that kind of small business, like really mission driven feel, but at a larger scale.
Nice. On the annual retreats, how many of those have you guys done so far?
Oh, we've done them every year since the company's beginning. They've looked different in times. Like in past years, there's been times that they've always been everybody together in one location to having fully remote during some of the COVID years to kind of more recently, it's been like every few years doing everybody together. I think the last one we did was 22 or 3, 2023, where everybody was together. But then, and most recently, for example, was kind of a hybrid arrangement, like where the concentration of staff, um, yeah, that were together, but then some remote participants. But every year, we do them every year.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like now that things are so remote, there is such an important difference when you actually get in person. One of the companies that I was with when we started doing the retreats, one, we were shocked at how expensive they were. I mean, compared to right, but also like we were shocked at just the to get a nice venue, to feed everyone well and have them have a good experience, and then also the activities it was quite a substantial amount, and so then we were like, "Okay, how actually valuable is this? And are we getting a return on this? What's the difference?" And for us, we found that it was absolutely a non-negotiable and needed to happen. And so for you, I'm curious, what were some of the positive effects of doing those? And then is there anything that someone should think about? If someone's on the edge of if they should roll that out for their company or not, maybe is there anything that is like a decision matrix that you would have them go through?
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say as well is we encouraged for our remote staff, kind of like the main expectation as we got back to hybrid was we're a hybrid company. So, if you don't live in an area where one of our main offices is located, then you're a remote employee. And we have a different pay scale for remote employees. And then that you report into the office approximately once a quarter, one of the headquartered offices or one of the main offices where your team is located. So kind of, I guess I just say that as a side note to that was a really important thing for that in-person connection. But to your original question, I think just for us, the non-negotiable is, we're a service-based company, and that means working together across teams to come up with solutions and collaborate to deliver something excellent that no one of us can deliver on our own. So the non-negotiable was just that we was the kind of foundational belief that we do that better when we are, have a strong connection to one another and can collaborate with one another. So again, while it wasn't every day, even for the hybrid employees, we're in 2 days a week. It wasn't every day that we're doing that, but some regular um, amount of time to work together, build connection, understand the full person that you're working with, and just kind of have that team morale to sprint when we need to sprint and solve hard problems together was the real driver.
Mm, awesome. Cool. And kind of bridging off of that, I'm sure when you get together, there's this momentum and there's the energy, and then you go back and it's like, okay, cool. Now we're back into work and strategic thinking. For you in the role of COO, managing the excitement and the culture of people and kind of being in the day to day of that, how did you or how do you manage both that piece and the long-term strategic thinking? Because that's kind of the unique position of a CEO often is you're in the weeds, but then you're also working with the CEO or the other visionaries in the company and thinking, "Where are we going?" Is there any sort of structure that you found that's been supportive for you in that?
Yeah, I think on the team side, just having a really connected and um, solid executive team that works well together has been crucial. And our CEO has been great at helping us come together as a group and kind of build out our long term arc. So we do two things. We do a 5 year strategy. So it's kind of like, let's look at the long term arc on a 5 year scale and then do the annual strategy where we're really coming together every year and saying, like, what are we doing this year? And kind of, it's not like we're looking at the 5 year strategy at all to set our annual strategies, but it is like a compass that we're looking at. We're in year three. How are we doing towards our 5 year strategy? So it helps. It's a helpful compass. But then really using that strategy framework to then get down into the details of day to day work. Cause then, you know, as a COO, I'll take, you know, I'll kind of understand where, our executive team and the annual strategy is thinking big picture and then build an annual strategy around that. And then I'm using that to work with our program teams and the ops teams and all our internal teams to really guide our quarterly and monthly goals and make sure we're tracking towards progress. And that does give me the kind of long-term vision and the day-to-day kind of managing workflow, project management needs on a day-to-day basis.
What I heard in that, it sounds like you've got this bigger long-term vision picture of what we want the company to look like, and then you're honing back into, "Okay, actually, what can we do this year, this quarter, today to get closer to that?" Has there been any moments in time in the company where looked at that 5-year vision and was thinking, "Man, is this actually what we want?" And you guys do you revisit that and change it? Or do you really stick with moving through the challenges to make that happen? Has there been any pivot points like that?
Definitely. I mean, we're uh, as a company, we're really kind of like learning focused and adaptively managed. So we're always looking for like, is this still right? And are we on track? And do we need to make any pivots? Um, uh, Kind of surprisingly, like our 5 year strategies, they're very high level, kind of like, what kind of impact we want to be making in the world. What does our client base look like? What's our, you know, revenue and staff count look like? So we've actually done like the last 5 year strategy, it was amazing. We were like, it didn't look like we were gonna hit all the targets we wanted to hit. And then just a bunch of stuff happened. Like we got some new contracts, we got traction in different areas of work, and we kind of made it happen in the last like years 4 and 5. And I kind of see a similar trajectory right now. But you know, the pivots kind of are happening at that annual scale. So that's the nice thing about this framework is, and then, the annual planning, even the pivots are happening at the quarterly scale. Um, so yeah, we're always looking to adaptively manage it and change course. And aren't super wedded to that if the context changes.
Or yeah, one of the key things that you mentioned that stands out to me is also just how maybe you didn't think some of those things would happen, but then certain things start coming in. Have you read Cameron's book, Vivid Vision?
I did a while ago when I first started the COO Alliance. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I we were kinda just talking a little bit before the episode, but I'm working with Jen Hootie, who is partnered with Cameron on some Vivid Vision stuff. So I work with her company, and I was watching some of these testimonial videos of people who got their Vivid Visions done, which are on a 3-year time frame. But one of the women, she was saying, like, "Man, it was, like, the last 6 months of, my 3-year chapter, and there was all these things that hadn't happened yet, but then in just the final kind of quarter of that, all these things started to happen, and she's like, "When I look back at my vivid vision, all of these things have come true." And there's now, like, studies that are coming out of seeing pictures and reading things every day of how much it actually trains your brain to be in alignment with the energy and the actions and bringing those types of opportunities to you. So even if there's things that shift or change, having some sort of, because I think that's where people get stuck is they're like, well, I don't know what it's going to be. And what if I write it and then it needs to change? I don't know. Like we're needing absolute certainty, but at the end of the day, things are going to shift and evolve. But if you at least have some sort of an idea of where you're going, you can kind of steer the airplane with some sort of coordinates and at least get what's the quote? Shoot for the moon and land amongst the stars."
Yeah, I think yeah, I love that part of Vivid Vision book, and I think, yeah, you're exactly right. Just having that compass to kinda guide you, even if the specific strategies or the timing or, the bumps, the highs and lows along the way are different. It's so helpful just to have that vision ahead of you.
Yeah. Speaking of lows, are you open to sharing with us what has been maybe 1 or 2 lows or challenges in the role that you've been in?
Well, was it I think it was about the beginning of 2024. Just the way our funding works, we kinda get these large contracts, but then the client buys into them. So we'll get a ceiling, a $90 million ceiling over 5 years, but then different, offices within our client's agency buys in up to that amount. So we we were looking, we have several of these types of contracts, and we're looking ahead of, kinda like making staffing and resource decisions around those with assumptions of a certain amount of buy-in coming into our contracts. We kind of were getting towards through our quarterly forecasting and coming up to our annual cycle, uh, just realizing that we weren't getting the buy-in as quickly, and it was just taking our clients longer it was taking longer for our in that traction with our clients. So we had a bridge that we were coming up on of, we have all these great staff. We do think the funding's gonna come through, but, it might be 3 months later, it might be 6 months later. So what do we do? So, what we did is we kind of, managed that transition to have a staff bridging initiative where we just, we're really transparent. Like part of our culture is open and honest. So we're really transparent with our staff. Um, and, said this is the challenge ahead. And, we really looked at kind of like key contributors and where people's skills were most aligned to the work that is already secured and we expect to come through. And essentially had to make some staff retention, but also staff reduction decisions within that context.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Was there any learning lesson in that of something that, making the best of a situation that may not feel the best in the moment? Anything that you would say was helpful that you did, or anything that you would recommend avoiding in the future?
You know, honestly, I think we made the best of a situation given the context that we were in. And I say this a little cautiously, but it was almost like we wanted to communicate. We wanted to be very transparent. And I think we maybe communicated almost to the point of, not widespread, but some confusion and uncertainty when we were actually going for kind of the opposite to be really transparent so people know that this is coming. But then some people I think felt, a little in the dark or unsure, created uncertainty because they weren't sure, oh boy, am I going to be one of the staff that bridges over to the other side or am I not? And, that was exactly what we were managing. But there was, some, of course, uneasy feelings, within that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's challenging because you're you're wanting to be transparent and clear, and also there's still probably things that you guys are unclear about, and so it'd be yeah, I totally could see that. Cool. One of the with the it sounds like a few times in this conversation, there's been mention of really it sounds like your executive team coming together and being pretty cohesive. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah. Yeah, and, like yes. Well,
Okay, cool. What are some of the maybe like more tactical things that you guys have done to ensure that your executive team is on the same page, especially through some of the higher growth seasons that you guys have had?
yeah, well, some of the tactical things comes down to, having regular check-ins with a clear agenda that we're really harvesting, like, what it's kinda like the bringing together the ears to the ground, kinda, what are we hearing? What are the issues that are arising? And then so, tactically having regular check-ins and having a clear agenda and venue for those to rise up. And then even down to, having good knowledge management and like task delegation across us so that we're really clear about who's driving what thing forward. Because everything we do is pretty intertwined. Um, so I think those are some of the tactical things. And then just making sure that we're consulting with one another on opportunities for sure, but also challenges that we're seeing throughout the company, so that, we don't move too far forward, uh, and realize that's kind of in conflict to something else, that there's some other important context or initiative that the executive team is for.
Mhm. Get and stay in sync is core value from a previous company I was with that when I first heard it, I was like, "Get and stay in sync." Like, I don't like, that's a core value. It didn't really register with me until seeing how crucial being in sync across departments, it really makes such a big difference. When people are isolated on their own islands, man, the amount of things that can come up. So being in sync with each other is so important. And the meetings, like you said, having an agenda, being clear about what are we actually talking about today. There's like two things with meetings is one, meetings like you're gonna go to the constraint of time. So if we have an hour for this meeting, but there's no agenda, you're probably gonna spend a whole hour talking about a whole lot of circles. But if you have a really clear agenda and you got a 20-minute meeting, it can be amazing at how quickly you can get through some really significant things. Reading Cameron's book, Meetings Suck. I don't know if you read that one, but that book, I was like, wow, I am not doing meetings properly. So yeah, having agenda, having someone to take note of the action items is so important.
Yeah. Mm. One of our main job competencies at Environmental Incentives is meeting management. So we take it really seriously and even we definitely hold ourselves as the executive team really accountable to that. But yeah, I think the other thing that maybe seems obvious is, but for the executive team is being really, really open and honest and um, both, you know, comfortable giving, but also receiving feedback. So crucial in us being able to work together and truly be effective. And that's been something that, you know, the that's part of the company culture that has helped, but us practicing it with ourselves and outside of with our teams as well.
Love it. What would this is kind of a fun question, but what would your fellow executives, what do you think if I asked them what it's like to work with Andrew? What would they say?
I hope they would say fun, and collaborative. And, I think I'm a problem solver, and my role is and the executive team at large, but specifically mine, is kinda connecting the delivery of our programs across the internal functions of the company. So very much a connector and, problem solving and bringing solutions to, any snags or things I see as able to be improved across the company.
Nice. Have there ever been any bigger tension points or disagreements across the executive team or with CEO? Sometimes, COO and CEO, there can be some tension there. Has there been any, like, really clear big obstacles for you guys in that?
I think the nothing that's like that I would say this one thing was a big obstacle for us. I think the balance is always balancing quality with quantity of what we can do. We're a professional services organization, and one of the things that we expect of ourselves as the executive team is to put out things to the company that are as high quality as we would expect our staff to put out to our clients. So I think there's a lot of good in that. And I truly believe that that's the right approach. But it does, when you're going from scaling to doubling and then doubling again in size, you've just got to be realistic of then if we want to have that quality and that's, really careful change management and rollout and, just even the quality of whatever the product is that we're putting out there, just being realistic and really good at prioritizing what we can accomplish in a certain amount of time.
Mhm. Do you guys, as an executive team, have any processes you go through for prioritizing where the company is focusing? Or is it just collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the annual like it's kind of like our planning cycle is the annual strategy, and then we have monthly planning and quarterly performance checks. And then we have those regular check-ins. That's the weekly kind of reprioritizing. That's kind of the way that we do that's the infrastructure that kind of helps us do all that prioritizing and reallocating the resources.
Okay, cool. And you guys get all together as an executive team? Do you have any one-on-ones just with the CEO, or what is that relationship structure?
Yeah, yeah. So one-on-ones with the CEO and also our chief strategy officer, who's a close partner to our CEO. Um, and then also executive checks with our uh their directors in our organization, but they'd be similar to a vice president in some organizations. And those are like of our verticals, our portfolios of client work.
Okay, very cool. Well, all in all, there's a couple last questions here that I would love to close up with, which one would be if you were to give advice to someone that's stepping into their first COO role, anything that comes up as someone that's kind of 15 years been with this company and risen through the ranks, what advice would you give someone?
Yeah. Really, as you're rolling out processes, make sure you're engaging users and understanding their perspectives and taking the time. It feels like more time as you're going through it to engage them and test it with them and make sure that what you're developing suits their needs. It feels like more time to roll it out, but then the time that if you don't do that, to then come back and fix things and adjust it and the time lost with that works wonders. Yeah, I think that would be kind of the main thing.
Okay, awesome. And last question here, I love to ask, what are you about? Could be business or personal. I would love to hear something personal maybe from you. What are you really excited about in the next quarter?
Um, I'm really excited about just seeing, changes in the company that we have coming up and just how we can adjust and manage our processes to meet what we're seeing as the upcoming client landscape ahead of us.
Amazing. Well, Andrew, that is all on my side. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Got it.